Alright, it's time for our update on the Dixie Fire, the Bootleg Fire, the Tamarack Fire, and I'm throwing a new fire in the mix today. We're also going to be talking about the Fly Fire, which is just to the northeast of the Dixie Fire. The cause is still under investigation. It could be a spot fire from the Dixie, but we will be covering that one as well because that is currently leading to some new evacuation orders in the area. Part of the reason I'm doing this update a bit earlier than usual is because there are some situations progressing as of right now, so I just wanted to be able to cover them in real time. So just a quick overview of the fires. You can see how active the Dixie Fire is right now. There's the fire perimeter, and then all those hot spots you see are what the satellite has been picking up in the last 24 hours where that heat signature is occurring. And you can see where the hot spots of this fire are, especially on this northern edge. Big reason for that, we've had southerly winds for really the entire last week that's been pushing this fire to the north, especially during the afternoon hours. And then you also notice that right there started as a spot fire, has now grown to more than 2,000 acres, and then most recently the Fly Fire down here. Now, still not totally sure if that is a spot fire. That would be a long way for a spot to travel, but I was listening to one CAL FIRE representative talk this morning that they're seeing spots like they've never seen in his 20 years of working in the history of his time at CAL FIRE. Normally, spots will go ahead of the major blaze, but he's saying they're seeing some with this fire 3 to 4 miles. And that just is one, due to the winds that have been persistent throughout this fire, but two, also how much energy is being released by this fire, going up into the atmosphere and being carried out to start new little fires out ahead of the major blaze. So again, that is, I think, the key area of concern right now, the Fly Fire, and then also this northern and northeastern finger here. Just a quick snapshot. Looks like there are a lot of hot spots near Bucks Lake, but CAL FIRE representatives this morning sounded like they were feeling confident about that area of the fire. Now, if we actually want to see what it's looked like today, you can see that haze throughout the morning hours as that smoke settles down when the wind is calmer. Then the winds cleared out the smoke. You see how active the fire was even earlier this morning, and then watch this puff of smoke just come through all at one time, almost as a wave, and just reduces all the visibility in the area. Key thing that makes me think about is they're not going to be able to use aircraft or helicopters with that kind of visibility, so that is certainly going to make the firefighting tactics much more challenging. Now, the good news comes in when we look at the Bootleg Fire. You can see that much less hot spots than about a week ago at this time. There were a couple spots jumping this northern edge right here yesterday, but they have a plan A and a plan B for containing that. They're bringing some dozers in here to create some line to protect to contain those spot fires. And then if that fails, they're also planning a firing operation to really protect all the properties around Summer Lake. So overall, Bootleg Fire is looking great. I think yesterday it only grew about 1,000 acres. It still is at 400,000 acres, so that is why I'm still covering this. It is the largest fire going on, but over the last few days, much reduced fire behavior. And part of the reason for that is we've had a little more moisture during the nighttime hours, but unfortunately, we are switching back to a more critical fire weather pattern. It's going to be warmer and drier in this area. So they do have the red flag warning back over the Bootleg Fire. So I will continue to watch this fire closely, although I'm hoping that this will be the last update on the Bootleg Fire because it certainly has been slowing down over the last 3 days. But again, because there's a red flag, I definitely will keep watching it just to make sure nothing new or unexpected pops up with that one. Now, when it comes to the Tamarack Fire, you can see that we've had southwesterly winds throughout this whole last week, and that's really been pushing this northeastern finger all the way into Nevada. You remember there was the one day where the spot fires jumped Highway 395 here, turned into its own little 2,500 acre fire, and then you also notice all those hot spots outside of yesterday's fire perimeter. So that is where the fire is the most active right now. That's what I'm watching the closest, and there are some new evacuation warnings, or I should say orders in place as of right now, so we will definitely take a close look at that whole area when it comes to the Tamarack Fire. If we actually want to see the Tamarack Fire, a few things I notice here, just how steep the terrain is in this area. Two, how much this fire was burning even in the earlier morning hours. And then I'll actually back it up here, but the third thing I noticed is you can actually see a couple retardant lines being dropped in here if you look closely. And if you look really closely, you might even be able to see a plane or two before the smoke just basically looks like it's about to overtake this camera. I keep reloading this camera to see if it's still there because it looks like there is some fire at the base of this hill. And as we know, fire likes to travel uphill, so certainly going to keep updating that one consistently. So if we actually want to look at the satellite imagery, and we'll dive into the Dixie Fire first, you can see that earlier this morning we still had a large amount of smoke. Some of that smoke was actually finding its way into the northern Sacramento Valley. First time that's really happened because we have had consistent southerly winds throughout this fire, blowing it up into Washington, parts of Nevada and Idaho. But it really did settle down this morning, led to some poor air quality. And then as we get farther into the afternoon, you see how much this fire picks up in those afternoon hours, and especially on that northeastern edge where, again, I think the top concern right now is that fly fire. So very interesting live cameras coming out of the Dixie Fire right now. You can see how that smoke was settled down there in the mornings, all the active behavior we were already having earlier in the morning. Then as you get into the afternoon, the winds pick up, clear the smoke out, but then you see this huge wave of smoke just flow into the region as there's what looks to be a massive smoke plume right behind it. So that's pretty interesting. I've personally never really seen that on a fire before. It almost looks like a haboob. That's a dust storm that just flows into an area all at one time, and it almost looks like that's what's happening right over some of these structures as well. Again, that's my main concern with that reduced visibility as that cloud comes in, is they're not going to be able to use helicopters or aircraft anymore, which is certainly a concern. If we just want to see that from another angle, actually, let's see if we can look at it on the satellite imagery first. So I believe what we're pointed at is that smoke plume right there. So watch to see if you can see a cloud or a puff of smoke moving through that area that reduces our visibility. It looks like there is that puff of smoke. You see it starts right there, and then as we go forward, it almost looks like it just shoots out. And you might think I'm spending too long on this, but it's weird to me because you notice the rest of the smoke plume is going to the north, which means our winds are most likely to the south. But then that puff of air looks like it goes straight west to east. If anybody knows the answer to that question, why that is happening, please let me know in the comments because I certainly don't know what's going on there yet. So again, here's another view. You saw that smoke that settled down overnight, cleared out as the afternoon wind started to pick up, a lot of activity going on, and then there's that puff of smoke that really comes through and reduces the visibility. So let's actually look at the fire perimeter for the Dixie Fire. If we zoom in here, well, I guess this is a combined Dixie Fire and fly fire forecast right now because that actually might be the bigger concern as of right now. So let's just start with the good news first. The good news is that whole southern edge, which I'll remind you was originally the top priority because it was closer to some of these more populated areas like Concow, Paradise, Magalia. That whole southern edge is looking great right now. Not seeing any hot spots down there. And they also said they were feeling fairly confident about the Bucks Lake area as well. It looks like there's a lot of hot spots there, but by the sound of it, they're doing a good firing operation to try to tie it into the lake, and they said they were feeling confident in that area. Now, a tricky area over the last few days has been this western edge. You can see these spot fires that have been jumping out to the left of the major blaze. Again, spot fires where the winds pick up a burning ember, toss it outside or past the containment lines, or what's hopefully a containment line, and then it starts its own little fires, and that has been happening over the last few days on this western edge. In previous days, they were getting some good control on those right when those spot fires drop, but I do know that is a persistent problem as of right now. Now on this northern edge, that's an area where we've seen a lot of our fire activity and a lot of the growth of this fire because, again, during the daytime, we get those winds funneling up from the south, really pushing that fire to the north. And I do know they are working as hard as they can to get some great containment lines in there, using dozers, hand crews, whatever they can use. Probably not aircraft today because of the large amount of smoke, but they said they were feeling fairly confident about their containment lines on this northwestern shoulder. Now, where I think is the top concern throughout the day today is this northeastern edge here, which is including that new spot fire from the Dixie Fire that has grown over 2,000 acres, and then also the Fly Fire as well, where the cause of that is still under investigation, but just based on the fact that a lot of our winds have been blowing that direction, and we saw that spot fire form right there, it looks like it's a very long distance for a spot fire to travel, but you can't really rule anything out right now. And as a CAL FIRE representative was saying this morning, he's seeing spot fire distances farther than he's seen in his entire 20-year career. So I think that's the key concern right there. But to really look at that, I'm actually going to pull up Cal Topo, because that's where we can actually look at structures as well. And if we zoom in here, you can see where the hot spots of this fire are. You see the perimeter and where the recent activity has been, especially on that northwestern edge, that new spot fire, that southeastern edge as well, although they are feeling confident down there, and then with the new Fly Fire. Now, if we actually wanted to look at where the structures are, you can click them on it, and you see that we do have a large amount of structures right near the Fly Fire. I believe that's Quincy. I think we can see that on the other map, but I just closed the other. There it is. So yeah, that's Quincy right there. All those structures that we're seeing. And that actually reminds me, last time I checked, there is now a mandatory evacuation order for Quincy due to the Fly Fire. So again, I usually say don't take my word for it on evacuation warnings, because I'm not sure when you're going to be watching this video or if the warnings will still be the same by the time you're watching it, but I did recently hear that, and it makes sense because the Fly Fire, as we saw in those live cameras, and based on how close it is to these structures, that is the top concern right now when it comes to the Dixie Fire. Now, if we actually want to look at a simulation throughout the day today, this is again Wharf S Fire, which is put forward by the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory. First thing I'll remind you, this is just experimental only. This doesn't take into account firefighting operations, which is one of the main factors that reduces the spread of fires. But I do like to show this because it shows how the fire and the atmosphere interact, and especially how winds can push a fire forward. So first, we're going to look at the very early morning hours, and I want you to keep a close eye on this southern edge, because during the nighttime hours and early morning, we get down canyon winds, and you can actually see how the fire interacts with those down canyon winds. You can see they're pushing right there, and that would act to push the fire forward as well. Again, we do have some great containment lines down in this area, so that most likely is not going to happen. But then you can see how the weather changes throughout later in the day. So in the morning you have those down canyon winds, and then in a second you're going to see them shift here. They turn into up canyon winds, and then once that happens, you start to see much more growth on the northern edge and this northern finger as well. You can see that this model is predicting some more growth on that northern finger, and that actually might explain that smoke blast we were looking at earlier, where all the smoke came into the camera and it looked like it was traveling from west to east. This model is predicting the winds to shift in this area to a more west to east direction. It'd be interesting to see if there's maybe, we can actually look in here to see if there's maybe a canyon in that area that is funneling the winds, because it certainly seems like that's happening. It looks like that canyon right there perhaps could be funneling some of that wind from west to east during the afternoon hours. If you have a better idea of why that large smoke blast that we were looking at earlier on the live camera happened, please let me know in the comments. So mainly just wanted to show that because I think it's a good illustration of how winds interact with fire, and also how those up canyon winds push the fire to the north and the northeast during the afternoon hours. And again, that's why the north and northeast areas of this fire are a major concern, because during the afternoon hours is when you're combining those winds with the warmest temperatures of the day and the lowest relative humidity. So that's where you get the most active fire behavior. And that is why I'm most concerned about that northern and northeasterly edge. Now when it comes to the Dixie Fire, this was updated at 11:30 this morning. We're currently at 142,000 acres, or should round up to 143 at this point. Again, that's about 40,000 more acres than we were seeing yesterday. Containment is at 18%. And as I said, as of like 15 or 30 minutes ago, there are some new evacuation orders in place. So you can go to the links in the description to find all of the most current evacuation orders. Now, when it comes to this fire, there have been 8 structures destroyed, but we do have a lot of personnel and resources on it right now. 31 helicopters. Unfortunately, I don't think they'll be able to use those today as there's a lot of smoke in the area. 355 engines, 83 dozers, 53 water tenders, 4,000 personnel, and 70 crews. So if you need some good news, that's the good news right there. We have a lot of resources working as hard as they can around the clock in some cases to really protect all the resources in this area. And it's amazing the work that they've done so far. You see a lot of those orange dots around there, those are structures, and you notice how many look close to this fire. But as of their last report, 8 structures have been destroyed. Again, it would be preferable that 0 structures were destroyed, but I think it's just a testament that to all of the amazing 4,000 personnel on this fire, that number is not larger, because this fire has been quite large and the fire behavior has been quite extreme throughout its lifetime. So to get an idea of how this fire might change in the future, we can look at the fire weather conditions, and there is a shift going on in the weather pattern. This really started yesterday afternoon, and throughout the day today, you see this large high pressure system really developing, turning into a large ridge over the area. That's what's bringing that warmer, drier air that we're currently seeing really fueling this fire. You can see how warm that air is. We're back into the low 90s both today and tomorrow for our forecast. You can see predominant wind direction during the afternoons is still from that southwesterly direction. Makes sense because that's those up canyon winds we're looking at on the Warfest fire simulation. But then I think the big concern is that 12% relative humidity this afternoon. I think that's why we're seeing some very active fires right now. And another big impact that has is on drying out the fuels, which just makes it more likely that those spot fires happen. I read somewhere that we're seeing about an 80 to 90% ignition rate with some of those spot fires, and that has been one of the biggest factors for the Dixie Fire throughout its lifetime. So again, that is what I think about when we see that low relative humidity. That does actually remind me of one of the spot fires that happened yesterday. It jumped Butts Lake. You can think about how this works. You have those southwest winds, picks up a burning ember, throws it over the lake, starts a new little fire here. And I do know, last I heard, they're working as hard as they could to get some resources in there to stop that fire before it continues to grow anymore. Just thought I would mention that because it was the reminder. Now, if we look at the forecast for Saturday, you're going to start to see a trend coming in that is going to provide some interesting changes to our weather pattern. You can see we are still hot as that high pressure system sits over the area, but it looks like it's still very dry at the surface. We're still into the low teens, but you're seeing a little bit of an uptick in the relative humidity. Again, at the surface, there's not going to be that much of an increase. It's upper air where we're going to see some more monsoonal moisture coming in from Arizona. Before I show that, though, I do just want to mention what might actually be the biggest factor when it comes to the relative humidity. The fact that it's staying extremely dry 24 hours a day. Normally you'd like to see this go up to 60-70%, but you see how it's staying below 25% for really the next 36 hours, and that's why this fire has been able to remain so active during the overnight hours. Now, I gave a little tease as to that moisture that's coming in. Again, this isn't going to be on the surface, so we're still going to see very dry fuels and dry conditions at where this fire is actually burning. But as I click forward here right now, you see that lots of dry air over the region. That's why our relative humidities right now are in the single digits to low teens. But then you notice this monsoonal moisture from Arizona once again is going to be finding its way up into our area. This looks to be especially playing a role on Sunday evening. So that's the big thing I'm going to be watching on Sunday evening, because the last time this happened, I believe it was last Sunday, Monday, we saw some very extreme fire activity with those pyrocumulonimbus clouds. That's a tongue twister there. which were creating some lightning on the fire, a lot of gusty, erratic winds. That was where we originally started to see that northeastern edge start to rapidly grow. So that is going to be the key thing I'm watching throughout this weekend, that monsoonal moisture finding its way back into Northern California. As of right now, they don't have any thunderstorms predicted for this area, but my major concern is the effects that'll have on instability, which really promotes fire growth and plume development. So that'll be the big thing I'm watching when it comes to the Dixie Fire moving forward throughout this weekend. Again, just to sum it up, a lot of activity going on right now. My key concerns are this northern edge and this northeastern finger, as well as that spot fire, as well as the fly fire. And there are a number of new evacuation warnings in place. Actually, I should say orders, because I believe they are the new ones are mandatory. This is one of the maps. It looks like there's another map for Tahoma County. So again, those links are in the description. Don't take that word for it. And again, this has happened in the last 15 to 30 minutes, so be sure to check with your local resources. Now, when it comes to the Bootleg Fire, this should be a relatively quick update because not a lot has happened over the last few days. You can see that it looks like there's a lot of smoke in this area, but most of that smoke is coming from the Dixie Fire. If you look really closely in there, you can actually see the burn scar of the Bootleg Fire and a little bit of smoke coming off of it, but certainly not those large smoke plumes that we were seeing about a week ago. Just to illustrate what this fire looked like a week ago, I can press, or I guess I don't really need to press play here. This was the update I did on Twitter about a week ago on the Bootleg Fire, and you can see how active that southeastern edge was. Lots of heat coming off this fire, lots of hot spots outside of the previous day's fire perimeter. So that was what this fire looked like when it was extremely active, burning about 60,000 acres a day. And this is what it looks like right now. So if this loads, you can see much, much better behavior, especially on this whole southern and western edge. Not a whole lot going on. We actually have great containment in this whole area. They're able to redistribute some of those resources to the more active parts of the fire, which is that northern edge right there. You do see we did get some spot fires yesterday jumping outside of the previous fire perimeter, but I do know they are currently using some dozers to contain that, and then if that doesn't work, they're planning a firing operation to further protect the resources in the Summer Lake region. So, we'll go up to the Bootleg Fire, and then there is one thing I wanted to mention about the Dixie Fire. It wants me to stay here, so I'll just mention it now. So I just wanted to click in here to show fire history on the Dixie Fire and how previous fires help current fires. You can see this is the fire perimeter for the North Complex last year, and you notice that right where the North Complex was last year is right where the Dixie Fire stops this year. So it gives you a great idea of how when the fuels are reduced in an area, the fire behavior is reduced as well. Now this also, it might be because they're reusing some of the containment lines that they were able to use for the North Complex. If you're a firefighter watching this video and you know the answer to that, please let me know, but most likely it's a combination of the two factors, being able to reuse some previous containment lines and then also the reduced fuels in the area. The other spot where they're able to do that for the Dixie Fire is up on this northeastern edge where we had the Chips Fire in 2012, and you can see that's another example right here where the Chips Fire burned out some of that fuel, so we haven't seen the Dixie Fire continue into that area. Very interesting how all those factors interact with each other. Now, if we go up to the Bootleg Fire, sorry for that little tangent, but I just remembered that I forgot to say that when I was covering the Dixie Fire. We'll keep fire history on because I think that's the key thing that we're talking about right here. Just look what this fire has done as it's gotten closer to where the Watson Creek Fire burned in 2018. You can see right where that Watson Creek perimeter is right where the Bootleg Fire perimeter is. Just shows that when the fuels are reduced, the fire stops. Again, could also be because they're able to reuse some containment lines. Now, I also wanted to show this map because it shows where the structures are. Again, those are the structures around Summer Lake, and those are the hot spots on that northeastern edge. But the good news is they have a lot of resources still on this fire, and since the majority of the fire is looking great at this point, they're able to put as much force as needed directly in between the fire and those structures to make sure that they are protected. So again, that is the top priority. That is the thing I'll be watching the closest over the next 24 hours. But overall, Bootleg Fire is looking great. When it comes to the numbers for the Bootleg Fire, it barely grew at all yesterday. Maybe 300 more acres. But what I'm currently hoping is that this will actually be the last time I cover the Bootleg Fire. Again, there is a red flag warning over the Bootleg Fire, so I'm going to keep my eye on it. But it looks like this one is basically wrapped up. But with that red flag warning in place, I will certainly keep an eye on it. If you think I'm being overly confident, I will also show the Wildfires Fire simulation for this fire. And notice the key reason I'm confident is because the predominant wind direction is shifting to a more northerly flow over the next 24 hours, which is actually good news because that'll blow some of that northern edge of this fire back into itself instead of pushing it closer towards Summer Lake. And we're almost 2 days into the forecast here for this fire, and you notice that there has not been very much growth at all whatsoever. The simulation predicts a little growth on that southern edge because of those northerly winds, but that's an area where we have containment, so I'm not actually expecting that growth to come in. So again, when it comes to the Bootleg Fire, it's over 400,000 acres, but it has significantly been slowing down over the last few days. Hopefully this will be the last time we cover it, as long as nothing unexpected or new happens. This fire should be just about, at least the most extreme parts of this fire should be just about wrapped up. 40% of the perimeter is contained. Although I will just highlight this, the official report, they're saying the fire will continue to be extremely active with gusty winds and extremely dry fuels. So again, that is perhaps the most important thing to think about with this fire. We do still have very challenging conditions, and we have this high pressure system that is going to be strengthening over the next 24 hours and throughout the weekend. That is creating some very warm temperatures in this area. You can see the forecast for today up to 91, but for tomorrow jumping up to 97. Now the good news is in the last couple days the winds have been just slightly calmer than in the previous forecast period, but you also notice how dry the air is in this area. So we have temperatures for the forecast for tomorrow up into the mid to high 90s. It looks like they're expecting some of those afternoon wind gusts to come in, although notice all of that from a more northerly direction, which in my opinion is good news because it'll blow the fire into itself instead of continuing to push it farther to the north with those southerly winds that we were seeing. But we also do have some extremely dry air in the area, critically dry fuels. A red flag warning is in place, so although I'm feeling confident about this one, again, we have challenging conditions moving forward, so I will keep my eye on it, and I will, of course, let you guys know if anything changes in the overall update and forecast for the Bootleg Fire. There are still some evacuation warnings in place, though, especially in that red region there, where you should go immediately, and you can find the link to that in the description below. So the last fire we're going to cover is the Tamarack Fire, which you see that smoke really picking up this afternoon. Some clouds in the area, which hopefully is creating some cover, reducing temperatures a little bit, but you can see that early this morning, fire looked pretty calm, but then as we get into the warmer, drier, windier parts of the day, that fire picks back up. So if we actually want to see what the Tamarack Fire looks like right now, again, a few things I notice here, how steep the terrain is, how dry a lot of these fuels look, and also if you look closely you can see a couple retardant lines. I'll back it up just in case you miss it because it's very fast. A couple retardant lines being dropped right there to try to keep this fire away from where we have more structures. But overall you can see that the Tamarack Fire is burning very actively right now, a lot of smoke coming off of it, and it's really not a surprise because there is some very tricky conditions in this area. Warm temperatures, dry air, some gusty winds, especially in the afternoons, and I think the biggest factor, the critically dry fuels, seeing some fuels at record low values. So if we actually want to zoom in to the Tamarack Fire, again, The key priority yesterday is still the key priority today. It's on that northeastern finger there. And especially as we get into closer towards places like the Holbrook Junction and Topaz Lake, where you can see a large amount of those hot spots showing up based on the satellite imagery. Now, the big story yet over the last couple days was we did have a spot fire that helped this fire jump 395, grew into its own 25-acre blaze, and that was partly what led to a lot of this new growth in that northeastern section. Now, if we actually want to look at why this is the top priority, we can go back out here and we can look at where the structures are in this area, and you'll see why that northeastern section is currently the top priority. If we zoom in one more time, we'll turn structures off at first, just so you can see where they are when I turn them on. Again, you can see all those hot spots, especially on that northeastern finger there and more the southern edge. And then as I turn the structures on, you can see that we do have a large amount of structures pretty close to where this fire is actively burning. Again, just because you're seeing those hot spots over these structure areas certainly doesn't mean that those structures have been destroyed. Luckily for us, that we have amazing firefighters that are masters of structure protection. But again, that is the reason that that northeastern finger is the top priority right now. Lots of structures in the area, and especially to the east of where that fire is right now. Now, if we zoom back out and look at some other parts of this fire, because that's such a high priority right now in that northeastern section, they've actually taken a lot of the resources from other parts of the fire and put them there. Like, for example, we actually don't have any resources on the southern edge of this fire, mainly because it's been burning extremely slowly. Big reason for that, if we look at fire history, you can see that the Washington fire burned in 2015, and they haven't had any resources on the southern edge of this fire at all. No firefighters down here, using them at the more high priority areas. And just the fact that we had a fire in 2015 has basically stopped the southeastern edge of this fire in its tracks. Now, we do still have some hot spots showing up down there, but again, that whole southern edge looking like it's very slow growth, so looking good there. Now, another top priority are the other places where we have structures. Right there in Markleyville, you can see those structures, but if you look at the hotspot map, I'll turn the fire perimeter off. You can see right over Markleyville, not seeing any of those hotspots. They are basically just patrolling right there, making sure no new hotspots pop up. But right now, Markleyville looking good, Grover Hot Springs looking good as well. And the other key priority is this, I don't know what you call that, northwestern finger popping out right there, because you do see some structures in that area, but that is one of the spots where we have the most containment on this fire. It's that arm right there stretching up between the fire and the structures, so looking good in that area as well. Again, the big story is this northeastern section, which is the closest to some more populated areas, and it is where the fire is most actively burning, so that is the part of the fire that I'm watching the closest right now, and I do know there are some new evacuation warnings in place. So when it comes to the Tamarack Fire, that one is up to 58,000 acres. We did increase the amount of containment lines yesterday, but the overall containment stayed the same because the fire grew as well. So just at 4% containment there. If we look at the personnel, you can see 1,300 personnel on this one. And if you read through this, I'm not going to read all of this, but they just repeatedly talk about how critical the conditions are right now. Warm temperatures and some critically dry fuels, making this just a very difficult firefight. If we look at the fire weather forecast going forward, you can see that same trend we were seeing with the other fires, getting slightly warmer throughout the day tomorrow, getting into the low 90s. Good news is the winds, we're not seeing as gusty of winds in the afternoon as we were previously seeing, but we still have some extremely dry air. That shows about a 16% low relative humidity tomorrow, but in some of the stations I was looking at around this area, it can actually get as low of into the high single digits or the low teens as well. So I think that's the big factor there, very dry air. Now, one factor that will likely have some impacts on this fire moving forward, you can see that dry air over it right now, but as we go into later this weekend, keep an eye on that monsoonal moisture from Arizona. That is going to be finding its way into California. And remember, the last time this happened, we weren't really sure what was going to happen because, one, it could have brought some rain and some higher relative humidity, and that would help the firefighters, or it could create some lightning and some new fire starts, which would some lightning and new fire starts and gusty erratic winds, which would hurt the fire suppression tactics. And when those thunderstorms came through last Monday, I think the big impact that we saw from those thunderstorms was actually from the gusty erratic winds. So if that pattern continues, that does create some cause for concern when it comes to Sunday evening and Monday as well, where we do have that thunderstorm threat once again returning to this area as that monsoonal moisture flows in. You can just see that throughout California. Good to see that they don't currently have a thunderstorm threat over the Dixie Fire, but we do have that over the Tamarack Fire, so we will keep our eye on that. Now, it is good to see that it's not continuing into Nevada, which is actually the top priority for this fire right now, so hopefully the hottest part of this fire is spared from those gusty erratic winds. Now, the other big thing when it comes to this fire, as I was saying, is the critically dry fuels, and that's really the biggest factor, or one of the biggest factors. There's lots of factors when it comes to wildfire, but one of the biggest factors that we're seeing for all of the fires, whether it's the Bootleg, the Dixie, the Fly Fire, the Tamarack Fire, I think this might be a little bit of a confusing map. Basically, orange and red means you have dry fuels. This might illustrate it better. This is some of the research that we do at San Jose State under the Fire Weather Research Laboratory. That green line shows the average values. The red line shows the record low values for fuel moisture. Since we started this data set, we actually go into the mountains, cut plants, weigh them, put them in an oven, dry them out, weigh them again. Tells you how much moisture is in the plant. And that blue line is this year. So you can basically see that we're well below the average, and we're even below the previous record low for fuel moisture. So critically dry fuels, and again, this isn't just our lab showing this. I know multiple other labs throughout the state have been showing historically dry fuels, and CAL FIRE has been talking about the impacts that is currently having on all these wildfires, makes spot fires much more likely, and just allows the fire to grow much faster. Again, one other snapshot of how dry we are, about 85% of California is in that extreme drought category, and big reason for that, we really had a bad winter. We had about 50% of our average rainfall, pretty bad snowfall year as well. A lot of that snow melted early, and unfortunately, we're only in July right now. So if you looked at that fuel moisture plot I was just showing, we're about equal to the fuel moistures we typically see late in August or even into September. So fire season's certainly starting early, and as you could just see based on the satellite imagery right now, certainly starting off a lot more active than we would have liked. Most of that smoke coming from the Dixie Fire right now, although the Tamarack Fire again was picking up this afternoon. So again, when it comes to all our fires, we covered the Dixie Fire. There are some new evacuation orders in place. Another concern with that one is the Fly Fire, which is closer to Quincy. My main concerns are for that northern edge and that northeastern finger, where we are seeing the most active growth. When it comes to the Tamarack Fire, my main concern is for that northeastern finger getting closer to some of our structures, and with that one as well, I know there are some new evacuation orders in place. Now, I purposely ended with the Bootleg Fire. You might have noticed that I went out of order, but I wanted to end on some kind of good news. Man, this map is not cooperating right now. I wanted to end on some good news because the Bootleg Fire, which is our largest wildfire, about 400,000 acres, is currently looking great right now. Not very many hotspots whatsoever, and in the last few days, it has only grown about 3,000 to 5,000 acres, so continuing to look great there. There is a red flag warning though, so I will continue to keep my eye on that one, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on all of these wildfires throughout the entire 2021 season, so you can follow me for these daily updates and forecasts on any major wildfire that happens in the West, and you can also follow me on Twitter, where I do more concise and consistent updates on all these fires, as well as post some live cams and just the basic information that you need to know about all these fires that are going on. So overall, I hope this video is helpful. My thoughts and prayers go out to everybody affected by these fires. A huge thank you to all the amazing firefighters out there. I hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching.